And you also got to be able to, as the president of the University of Chicago mentions here in point blank, stick up for the principles that make a university a great thing in the world of knowledge production and truth seeking. Regardless of the issue that may exist on campus or, in just the broader society, if a university is going to pursue its purpose in the pursuit of the truth, that requires a certain amount of accountability on the part of the administrators in particular, to make certain that that mission can be carried out and that the rights of those who don't want to be involved on protest regarding any issue be respected. And so, slowly but surely, as it were, and to my mind, too slowly, a number of university administrators finally did respond in the last couple of weeks and put an end to the protests, air quotes, encampments on their different campuses. And the reason I'm calling it in air quotes is because that's not protesting. Not covered under the First Amendment. Thank you very much. And it certainly doesn't fit with any time, place, and manner restrictions that are traditional to college campuses, particularly to private campuses. And one such notion in particular is the University of Chicago. Now, the reason that that might ring a bell is the University of Chicago is the namesake for the Chicago Principles, is also the producer of the Calvin Report. All of these things give us these sort of baseline understandings of academic freedom and free expression on campus that are so critical. In the vein of being about the pursuit of the truth, you have to be able to allow different groups to speak and work freely, but that also means you cannot allow a heckler's veto or one group to hinder another from working freely on the campus in pursuit of the truth. Now, engaging in anything unlawful is a different question. Obviously, that gets shut down. But there's a number of these, so I'm going to go through the highlights. This is from Paul Alivisados, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name right, who is the president of the University of Chicago, writing for the Wall Street Journal earlier this month. Why I ended the University of Chicago, I'm going to put air quotes on it, protest encampment. Students demanded that we side against Israel, violating the core principle of institutional neutrality. As president of the University of Chicago, I ended the encampment that occupied the university's main quad for more than a week. The Tuesday morning action resulted in no arrests. No, that's good. Recent months have seen tremendous contention over protests on campus, including pressure campaigns from every direction. That made this decision of enormous import for the university. When the encampment formed on our campus, I said I would uphold the university's principles and resist the forces tearing at the fabric of higher education. I didn't direct immediate action against the encampment. I authorized discussions with the protesters regarding an end to the encampment in response to some of their demands. Shouldn't give in to any of them. But when I concluded that the essential goals that animated those demands were incompatible with deep principles of the university, I decided to end the encampment with intervention. Good. They are foundationally against the principles of the university with that one. They're not interested necessarily in pursuing the truth. Something I note before of activists generally, but or at least it seems to be most activists are a tenuous relationship with the truth, particularly if it comes from a postmodern perspective, but that's a whole other thing. Some universities have chosen to block encampments from forming at all or end them within an hour or so. We had the means to do so. Immediate intervention is consistent with enforcing reasonable regulations on the time, place, and manner of speech, and it has the advantage of minimizing disruption. Yet strict adherence to every policy, the suppression of discord to promote harmony, comes at a cost. Discord is almost required for the truth-seeking function of a university to be genuine. Discord, yeah, actually, I would agree with that. Not at the expense of shutting down the functioning of the university. That is not discord that has an underlying agreement with the truth-seeking of the university. This is where he is wrong. The so-called protests, as it were, are not necessarily about truth-seeking as much as just about shutting down and disrupting the function of university to begin with. They do not share the fundamental principle, it doesn't seem like, to me at any rate, of pursuing the truth that is the core function of a university. And therefore, that discord actually does not do anything to help when you have discord that's rooted in that fundamental of a difference. Protest is a strongly protected form of speech in the University of Chicago culture, enshrined in the Chicago Principles for a reason. In times of discord, protest serves as a mechanism for democratic societies and places of reason like university to find a way back toward dialogue and compromise. This is why you don't want something that's anti-free speech, because free speech is the pressure valve. Free speech is the pressure valve, as it were. This has value even if protests result in disruption or violate the rules, up to a point. Now, I argue if they're disrupting and violating the rules at the start, then there is no up to a point. When a protest substantially interferes with the learning, research, and operations of the university, when it meaningfully diminishes the free expression rights of others, as happened with this encampment, then it must come to an end through dialogue or intervention. Straight to the point right there. That is holding them accountable for not allowing their fellow students to engage in their purpose at university. If there are students, again, there's some reporting says the majority are outside agitators. We'll get into that at some point. But it has to end. Therefore, it was a crucial decision whether to seek a dialogue to resolve a disruptive protest. Some will argue that the moral hazard of even holding such discussions is so severe that they should never be undertaken at all, that no agreement could possibly be legitimate if it originated from these circumstances. Others will say such dialogue should always be sought. I believe dialogue may be appropriate under certain circumstances, provided that protesters come to it openly and with an understanding that the consequences of their policy violations will be reviewed even-handedly. The same applies to the discipline now that the encampment has ended. So I authorized the opening of dialogue with the protesters, even though that extended the number of days the university was disrupted. I won't describe the sequence or the content of those discussions, since we agreed that our exchanges would remain private until we reached a favorable conclusion. I'm going to say you didn't reach a favorable conclusion if you had to end the encampment. But anyway, during our substantive dialogue, there were some very difficult moments, but also moments of progress. The student protester representatives offered analytical arguments and made powerful statements. Their faculty representatives and liaisons also made important contributions. I believe that the administration representatives showed respect for the interlocutors and came to the discussions with genuine openness and a willingness to look for ways to make it work. Why then didn't we reach a resolution? Because the core of the demands was what I believe is a deep disagreement about a principle, one that can't be papered over with carefully crafted words, creative adjustments to programming, or any other negotiable remedy. The disagreement revolves around institutional neutrality, a foundational value to the University of Chicago. It is a principle animated by the idea that authority can't establish truth for an entire institution dedicated to truth-seeking. Rather, it is imperative of individuals to seek truth without being limited by authority. Institutional neutrality vests freedom of inquiry and speech directly in faculty and students, where it belongs, which is to say, the university itself cannot take a side on anything. Students and faculty can do whatever the hell they want. But in this case, they don't like it if you're neutral. They're demanding that you violate that. That's his argument for why he ultimately ended it. It was a foundational disagreement. I would argue it's a foundational disagreement from the jump, because there's not necessarily a desire to be truth-seeking involved on one side. And that's actually why he should have ended it too, aside from this. Underpinning the demands was a call for the university to diminish ties with Israel and increase ties with Palestinians in Gaza. In short, the protesters were determined that the university should take sides in the conflict in Israel and Gaza. Other demands would have led to having political goals guide core aspects of the university's institutional approaches, from how we invest our endowment to when and how I make statements. Faculty members and students are more than free to engage in advocacy on, I would say activism for crying out loud, on one side or the other. But if the university did so as an institution, it would no longer be much of a university. As the depth of this philosophical difference became clearer, I decided to end the dialogue. I yielded on some time, place, and manner policies and allowed some degree of disruption in favor of protest, regardless of the viewpoint. Engaged in dialogue with those who were disrupting the university so long as they were prepared to face discipline. But there is no way I would ever compromise on institutional neutrality. As quite a powerful statement from the president of the University of Chicago, and quite brief, also here in the thing, but yes, he shouldn't compromise on institutional neutrality. He is right about that. And it's regardless of whatever the issue is, could have been a completely different topic in terms of the protests themselves. And he could still make the same argument with that, but he also should have made that argument because they don't necessarily, there's the activists involved here, regardless of whatever the issue is, don't necessarily have the same foundational goal of truth seeking that is the purpose of a university either. There are others here. Actually, this came from the UNC Board of Trustees. I believe this is UNC Board of Trustee Marty Kotis. Here from a special meeting that was actually earlier this morning on the 13th of May, 2024. For reference, I haven't actually listened to this yet, but we talk about peaceful protests, but when you destroy property or take down a U.S. flag and you have to put gates around it, North Carolinians are watching all this and they are not happy. I think it's imperative that we have proper resources for our law enforcement to protect the campus, and that means our property, and that means the flag as well. And this is where I go about saying that things like what he's talking about are not protests.
And I'll just make one last comment. We talk about peaceful protests, but when you destroy property or you take down the U.S. flag, and you have to put up gates around it that cost money, or deploy officers to do that, North Carolinians are watching all of this and they are not happy. And I think it's imperative that we have the proper resources for our law enforcement to protect the campus. And that means our property, and that means our flag as well. And I'll just...
Now, I will say this. The reason this came up is actually, as you might see it, he was quote tweeting another thing here before, that UNC Chapel Hill trustees have moved to divert the DEI funding over to the police department after the resulting protests happened. But all in all, the point is being made. You have to hold folks accountable when they are disrupting the function of a university with this. And why? I talk about the universities because they are where we train the next generation of scientists, right? And so I've been thinking a fair bit lately about, what does this say to the next generation of scientists if you allow this kind of thing to happen, where you're not allowing diverse viewpoints to be had, where you are allowing disruptions in the purpose and mission of others in their lives, in the purpose and mission of a university, from activists or from just people who don't want the university to function, regardless, again, of what the issue around that is. I couldn't care less what the issue around it is right now. There's different things afoot here is what I'm thinking of. Let's see. Others here, the Penn interim president, Larry Jameson, ending the encampment at University of Pennsylvania. To the Penn community on May 10th, 2024. We have worked with serious intention for nearly 2 weeks to engage the protesters on the college green, who were notified on April 26th, the second day of the encampment, that they were in violation of Penn's policies. This outreach has been met by unreasonable demands and a dangerous escalation of the encampment. Our community has been under threat and our campus disrupted for too long. Passion for a cause cannot supersede the safety and operations of our university. Early this morning, we took action with support from local law enforcement to remove the encampment. We would like to express our gratitude to the City of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Police Department for their support. This is an unfortunate but necessary step to prevent violence, restore operations, and return our campus to our community. Under these extraordinary circumstances, and to provide for the safety of our community, access to the College Green area of campus will be restricted until further notice. Those wishing to enter the area will be required to show a valid Penn card. Those without proper identification will be asked to leave, and if necessary, will be escorted off campus or considered trespassing. The protesters, air quotes again is appropriate here, refused repeatedly to disband the encampment, to produce identification, to stop threatening, loud, discriminatory speech and behavior, and to comply with instructions from Penn administrators and public safety. Instead, they called for others to join them in escalating their disruptions and expanding their encampment, necessitating that we take action to protect the safety and rights of everyone in our community. I mean, late to the party, but that is your job as an administrator in a university, again, regardless of whatever the hell the issue is. It is your job to make sure the university can function, to make sure that other students and faculty and staff are, safely able to go about their business on the university campus, and that the functioning of the university can continue. We would not allow further disruption of our academic mission. We would not allow students to be prevented from accessing study spaces and resources, attending final exams, or participating in commencement ceremonies, which for many did not happen during the pandemic. University leaders met with representatives of the encampment on multiple occasions for extended periods of time. We hoped that reasonable conversations would address both the concerns of protesters and the needs of the university. We made clear that their proposals were not possible, including their demands that participating students and faculty receive amnesty without proceeding through our due process for conduct and for divestment from entities engaged with Israel. Penn remains unequivocally opposed to the divestment, and it is unlawful for institutions receiving funding from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We also made clear that the encampment needed to disband and offer ways in which the protesters could continue their demonstration in compliance with our policies. We proposed and still hope to deploy Penn's academic resources to support rebuilding and scholarly programs in Gaza, Israel, and other areas of the Middle East. Despite diligent efforts to find a path forward, the gap between the positions of many in the encampment and the university proved too wide to bridge in this volatile environment, while the risks to our community and our missions continue to increase. This decision is viewpoint neutral and affirmed by our policies. There are times when our abiding commitment to open expression requires balancing free speech with our responsibility to safety, security, and the continued operations of the university. See, I don't like that, actually, as a statement, because that makes it seem like there's some legally correct thing that they're doing when they did not. I'm sorry, an encampment is not protest involved here. I don't think the camping out is not a protest. Restricting the movement of others is not a protest. Again, regardless of what the heck the issue is, that's not protest. This is one of those times and why we have acted. Open expression and peaceful protests are welcome on our campus, but vandalism, trespassing, disruption, and threatening language and actions are not. Likewise, actually, MIT's president, Sally Kornbluth, also did a fair bit here, talking about it. Again, the messages in here actually are very similar amongst these group of presidents, and of course, things here in recognizing that there is a very serious difference between peaceful protest and free speech and engaging in unlawful behavior, if not outright criminal behavior, and illegal and civil disobedience, as it were. And likewise, actually, what's been great is that some folks, like this is actually from UNC, what is this? UNC faculty, students, parents, alumni, and citizens in North Carolina, open letter to the University of North Carolina in support of the leadership. Let's see, and they talked about it. As on April 30th, UNC leadership concluded that protest actions had disrupted campus safety and normal functioning of the university and violated multiple reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions and state criminal law. UNC leadership detailed some of the violations in emails to the community and on a website featuring an FAQ stating the protesters, including many who are not members of the Carolina community, repeatedly and knowingly violated state law and university policies that provide for peaceful demonstrations. As documented by the university, these include attempting to enter the South Building by pushing police officers, banging on doors and windows, tearing down barricades on Polk Place to secure the area, and using them to push at counter-protesters and police. Throwing water bottles at university leaders and others, removing the American flag from the Polk Place flagpole, engaging in a physical altercation with police officers while university officials and staff sought to return the American flag to its place, intimidating fellow students or other passers-by who were not engaged in the protest, causing damage in Polk Place, breaking in or attempting to break into academic buildings, entering classrooms during final exams to disrupt. There's a much longer list, as it were. And there's other things, of course, here that I will not go into mentioning, but All of this is to say one main kind of point here. You do absolutely have the right to speech. You do absolutely have the right to protest. And it doesn't matter what the issue is. But you don't have, when you have some fundamental disagreements with the nature and purpose, and you're disrupting the functioning of the university over it, when the function of the university is the pursuit of the truth, and so too for scientists, actually, you don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to impinge upon the rights of others in that way. And you certainly don't make any friends, I don't think. But you don't have the right to do that. And when you're doing so, it crosses the line from speech that is covered by the First Amendment and most college codes of conduct, and speech, well, not speech at all, actions that are not covered. Like breaking and entering buildings, occupying buildings, as was done in Columbia and UCLA and others. Camping out on property isn't covered. Blocking traffic isn't covered. All of those kinds of things are not covered. Regardless of what the issue is, I wouldn't care which issue it was. But what does it say if the next generation of scientists are thinking in this manner? Now, I would say, just to put a fine point on it, this is certainly not all students that are invested in this. And for a lot of folks, this is not the primary issue for them on a college campus. Fine. With that in mind, fine by me. But that doesn't mean it's a good signal to send that you will not enforce the rules with respect to free speech and the rights of others involved. Protesting is fine, but destroying stuff is not. And you also got to be able to, as the president of the University of Chicago mentions here in point blank, stick up for the principles that make a university a great thing in the world of knowledge production and truth seeking. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. Stay curious.